Hey guys, welcome to the Constitution class. It's about 2:30. So if you guys want to jump ahead to you want to jump ahead to the class, it's going to be in about a half an hour. So um, jump ahead about 30 minutes, and that's when the class starts. Just letting people come in and gather. Oh, yeah. What's up there, Smirk? How did you get that name, by the way? It's an interesting name, Raging Smirk. It's hot in SoCal too. Ugh, brutal. Hello, Sheila from North Carolina. Hmm, Michelle, I don't. Mm, my Pedialyte freezer parts or freezer pops can't even talk. Michelle, I don't think you really want me to answer that question. I don't feel good. I haven't felt good in a week, 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks now. Whatever I caught, it was not good. Ever since I had my surgery, though, one of the things I struggle with is making sure that I have enough hydration. So the Pedialyte pops are kind of a little treat for me. But right now, especially, um, it's just I because I just don't feel good, and I've been having things that would cause me to need extra electrolytes. Suffice to say, um, I've been one of the things I've been doing. Sheila talking about the coconut is I've been doing the coconut oil and coffee, coconut oil, MCT oil. That's helped a little bit. My girl Amy, how are you? I miss you, Amy. All y'all don't know how special Amy is to me. What am I talking about? I'm talking about how horrible I feel. This is a Pedialyte, a frozen Pedialyte pop. It's freaking roasting today. It feels like it's hotter than the sun, and the humidity here is off the charts. I feel like it's Mississippi. So, um, these are my little treats, Amy. Uh, because I struggle with getting hydration. It's Pedialyte. It's frozen Pedialyte is all. Tastes good, actually. I enjoy it. I literally have like 25 boxes of these Pedialyte things because they were going out at the grocery store. So I stocked up on them. Well, I do the coconut water too. Well, not coconut water, Amy. I'm putting coconut oil into coffee, for like MCT coffee in the morning, and that's helping a little bit, but marginally. I will try the coconut water. I'm not saying that I won't. I'm guessing coconut water is a little different than coconut oil. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 feeling like $1 million and one feeling like death is, I'm at death's door. I think I would probably be accurate to say that I'm about a -2. Oh, okay. All right. I like that raging part. Yeah, it's a little sweet, Amy. It is. Well, I actually, so I have a friend of mine who's she's one of America's frontline docs, and she told me, based on my symptoms, that she believed that I had the BA5 variant because I literally have no energy. I could sleep 15 hours a day. If I literally in the morning when I get up, I have to peel myself out of bed. Hell no. No. Never under any circumstances. Thank you, Amy. That is a big fat negative. So what do y'all think about Mar-a-Lago getting raided? Amy, I'm going to call you when this is over because I got something I got to talk to you about. Good stuff. Today? A plane landed on the 91 today? My buddy Eric. My buddy Eric is highway patrol right in that area. That's the area he patrols. I should ask him. Oh yeah. Airplane lands on 91 freeway in Corona. Wow. Okay. Well, can you hear me chewing? Is it that bad? Should I mute myself? I am nonchalant today. That is absolutely true. I am as nonchalant as it gets. I think my attitude could best be described as zero F's given.
What's happening?
What Tracy, the funny thing about that last night is that he did not know that he was chipmunked. He did not know he was chipmunked. He was talking and he didn't know it. And he just wondering what the heck. I was laughing so hard. Thank you, Amy. What's up, hamster?
What's going on, Ron? Mr. Nonchalant?
Yeah, I don't care about anything. I am, by the way, I don't know if you saw, I sent a link in our thing about the Taiwanese government has given $3.1 million to Nancy Pelosi.
Interesting. I'll have to check that out. I just got done working out, so I haven't seen anything in the last couple hours. You got to watch that full video I sent you yesterday. It's got some good stuff about Taiwan.
Which one? Because
Well,
I haven't
I
even
only
looked.
I only emailed you one video.
Did you
there
send it to you? Send it to me individually?
Yep, I emailed it because I wanted it for the show.
Oh, that one.
How hot is it in Texas, Raging Smirk? I scrolled up. I wanted to catch up on the early chat. We got a Frozen Ron. We got a good afternoon from Michelle. There's an Amy Fierce Warrior Thompson. It's pretty hot in San Diego, but nothing compared to a Texas hot.
So I guess an airplane crash landed on the 91 freeway today.
And did everyone survive?
Appears so.
Good. Boy, Dan Bongino is on fire today. He's furious about that. He basically says you got to dismantle the whole FBI and start over, which is obviously not a uncommon thought process right now. But for a guy that profile saying it, it's kind of a big deal.
Maybe, or he's just virtue signaling.
Not at all, man. Bongino's pretty legitimate, dude. He's got about as much integrity as any of the big names. I would say I would hold him up there.
You know where he stands on my litmus test.
Of course I do. And you also know why. Those guys can't say anything different. There's too much of a normie audience that you have to reach. You can never be on Fox News if you're going to lead with 9/11.
Doesn't matter. Truth is truth.
Well, yeah, but truth
is truth.
You're accepting your conclusions as 100% fact. And
well,
I'm thinking they're very light. I share your opinion, but I don't state it as a fact.
All I'm saying is that you cannot state the official story. If you state the official story as fact, then you lose credibility to me. And he states the official story as fact.
No, I understand your position. I understand his, and I think the guy's so good on so many other issues that you got to kind of, that's why it's not my litmus test.
Well, considering that's probably the most important issue, if not the most important issue facing our country, because so many things went wrong as a result of that.
Yeah, you could say the same thing about election integrity. You could say the same thing about Russia. There's a lot of those issues. There's a lot of litmus tests.
Those are all no. I'm talking about where the country went off the rails wrong. It started as a result. Well, it didn't start, but it accelerated. Accelerated on an uncontrollable level as a result of the events of 9/11. And that seminal moment is critical to, if we have to get rid of the Patriot Act, we have to get rid of so many things that resulted from that bogus event.
And that's where and this is where we differ, because I totally get what you're saying and the importance of the event, but I don't put it as the seminal moment. I put it as one among many of where the things went off the rails and accelerated. And there's several examples. JFK being shot. That's huge. That's when
yes, but JFK being shot didn't usher in a complete reorganization of the government to where
I would argue that it did. There was a complete takeover. There was a complete takeover by the military-industrial complex right then.
Not on the same level. I agree with you. I agree with you that it did definitely bring things into, but not at the level that not at the comprehensive level that 9/11 did.
And I would say it absolutely did. It brought in the military-industrial complex, took over basically running our government for more than a decade, got us into Vietnam. We got out of it somewhat in the 70s, and then 9/11 came around and they took back over. Its pendulum swung back. And there's many examples of it. Civil War, 1913. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying there's more than one seminal moment. Well, he's asking about the Chargers and Saints. I don't care about the Chargers. I'm from San Diego. Those traitors. I did participate in the San Diego Charger jersey burning festival. We had a big old bonfire, and everyone threw away their Charger gear when they moved to LA.
The Chargers didn't have much of an alternative.
Sure they did, except for we voted them down. They wanted to get greedy with their stadium, and we the voters in San Diego said, nah, taxpayer money needs to go for something else. Billionaire owner can build his own stadium, so we did. Now, we the people, I would 2 or 3 years ago, I would have talked football with you all day long, but since the last few years when I started taking a knee, I've got very little interest in the NFL. And for the record, I am a Dallas Cowboy fan.
Well, and I don't even care. I don't even care about the NFL anymore. I don't have a team. I don't watch it. But when I did have a team, my favorite team was whoever was playing Dallas.
Yeah, I know a lot of people like you. It's totally understandable. But I'm actually from Texas, so I'm not one of the bandwagon guys that you hate. You got to hate me for other reasons.
Yeah, it's like people hate me for being a Dodger, or they think I'm a bandwagon Dodger fan.
Well, you are.
No, I'm not.
Speaking of which, I'm very disappointed you didn't show up today with a broom. I mean, you sweep my Padres and you're not even going to rub it in? I was fully ready for it.
Yeah, well, the Dodgers, that was actually pretty sweet too.
Yeah, well, I didn't get to watch it. I've been super busy this week. Hey, let's get our betting pool going. I'm going to go with my usual 259.
All right. Well, then I'll one up you and go 258 since it's worked well for me. The previous, not last week because I wasn't here, but the previous two. 258.
3 weeks of mid 100s, no rain. We're under mandatory drought conditions. Feel like I'm back in California. Sounds great. What did I just read today? Someplace they wanted people to stop doing something with their water, like no drinking or something like that. I don't know. It's pretty bad. But do we have a water shortage or a water management problem?
Or do we have a manufactured crisis because of weather manipulation?
That's that too. Well, that would be an actual. Oh, Michelle, don't rub it in. You're supposed to be rooting for the underdogs. Of course, manufactured weather crisis would fit into mismanagement also. Although it would be intentional mismanagement. What was that noise?
So the one question that I have for the Padres is, who's your Padre, baby?
Stop it. Just stop.
Who's your Padre, baby? Hello, Jennifer. Are you going to be around tomorrow, Jen? Jen, are you going to be around tomorrow? I could come down if you're going to be around.
MSNBC ran a hit piece today on Patriots.win.
Really?
Yep. Calling us the radical right. Michelle's in with a 3 o'clock.
Okay. I'll are you going to be around early, or the earlier the better, Jen? I mean, within reason, obviously. 2:57. So I got 1 minute until, 2 minutes until I turn into a pumpkin. Michelle's got 3. Tracy's going 3:01. I got 2:58. The hamster's got 2:59. Did you change your name back?
No, I forgot today. Wouldn't matter much.
Okay. I'll text you, Jen.
So on your Pelosi received money from Taiwan, it says China revealed the details from Silkway News. So we're going to question the source and read the story.
There was it was from some Gephardt document where they showed that they have that they've given her like $3.1 million.
Yeah, there's no crime in that, or it should be, but there's not. It says just they've been sponsoring American politicians for many years, just like every other country does. Our politicians are for sale. Shocking news. Nothing all that earth-shattering about that revelation.
Well, it's 2:58. And he's not here yet, so
I don't have a second.
2:59 was taken, Sue.
That's okay. I'll share the prize with Susan. With Sue, sorry about that. Sue and I can root for the same team.
Well, it's 2:59, so.
All right, come on, Doug. Get in here.
I'm out.
That's absolutely correct about K Street, but it's even bigger than that, Sue. Well, you take it even further. I mean, when was the last time a politician wrote a bill? It's all written by K Street lawyers. You know, they get the bills. You know, the lawyer's job is to sell the bills to each other and then to their constituents.
2:59 today.
I tried 2 minutes ago, but it went into my junk box.
So I would have won.
I'm looking, then finally went to the junk mail.
So I would have won. Again.
If ifs and nuts. Hey, Doug.
Yeah, hi, how's it going?
It's going great.
Yeah, I actually didn't take lunch today so I could be here so I could work on a script for a video I want to do regarding what happened yesterday. So I finished the script, but I still got to record it, so I'll probably do that tonight.
I enjoyed your article today, Doug.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, what happened yesterday, Doug?
What do you mean?
What happened yesterday?
What do you mean what happened yesterday? Are you seriously asking me that question?
He's talking about Mar-a-Lago, Ron.
I know. I'm teasing. It was a joke.
And thank you for noticing the article, and the videos, and kind of go into some of that, but really going to break it down, constitutionality wise.
Good.
I don't. 1 second. I don't. Raging Smirk. I don't. I don't discount the HAARP thing, but they don't use the HAARP nearly as much as they spray the stuff in the sky to seed the clouds. That's not conspiracy. That is known fact that they use weather as a weapon.
Tracy, we're not supposed to call it a raid anymore. As of this morning, the media's told us it's not a raid. It was they were picking up some court-requested documents, but we can't call it a raid. And we don't know what a woman is, and we're not in a recession. And double plus good.
Oh.
Yeah, did you guys catch that? The media trying to spin it so it wasn't a raid. They're saying that feeds into Trump talking points. Eggs on his base, so don't call it a raid. Ridiculous.
But what does it mean when the FBI shows up with their guns? Is that not a raid?
Apparently not anymore. Not today.
I'll tell you what. Ask Roger Stone and see what he thinks. They
were celebrating that raid.
Yeah.
It's like these people don't understand that we have a memory. or that the internet is forever. I bet you go back, the same people saying it's not a raid today. You can go back there and look at them talking about the 4 a.m. raid of Roger Stone. Same people, same group set of actions, but you got to get a different name.
Well, and also what's funny is FBI is an important tool of the Biden administration. But when Bush was president, it was being used as a secret police at a Gestapo because of the Patriot Act.
Well, the Patriot Act, you mean the fraudulent thing that came as a result of 9/11?
Yeah, that thing.
The one that was pre-written months before 9/11?
Exactly, that one. But they needed 9/11 as a pretext to make it go through.
One thing is, nothing in the Patriot Act was new. All they did was take a bunch of stuff and pull it into one document. What they were already doing. Now, that said, when people ask me about the Patriot Act, I said, well, is it constitutional? Do we need it? And I said, well, I don't believe it's constitutional, but we didn't need it anyway. We already had a Patriot Act. Everybody's like, what do you mean we already have a Patriot Act? I said, yeah, it's called the Second Amendment. I guarantee you, if everybody was walking around with a gun on their hip, Islam committing terrorism would be the least of our worries.
Do you see how they're already backing off of the Inflation Reduction Act? Because now it's been pretty much obvious that it's not going to reduce inflation. Like the day after it passed, they're no longer trying to sell it. That one's pretty amazing.
Oh, well, good to see the chat room, and there's a lot of people in there waving at me and saying hello, and we the people, the man, the legend. Well, okay, I'll take it. Jen, you're back on the computer. I don't even know what that means, but I'm going to assume you weren't able to use the computer for a while, or you were using your phone or something like that.
Who's back on the computer?
Jen.
Jennifer. Oh, because she's on the computer because her phone doesn't work. Her phone keeps stalling, so she's watching from the computer now.
Okay, well. And Tracy, exactly, a gun for every citizen. Yeah. We should take a lesson from Switzerland, right? All right. We are, and Ron does not feel good. He's under the weather, but war between the states, he was going to be here for that. This is like one of his favorite things to talk about. He's done quite a bit of research himself.
I'm a very, very, very big fan of I guess you might call it alternative history.
Well, let me spoiler alert, everybody! Spoiler alert! All right, Ron, what's your opinion of Abraham Lincoln?
That he's a no good, worthless piece of dog shit.
All right, that's a spoiler. All right, well, yeah.
I get it.
I've got a question. This ties into what we're going to talk about, because how I met you was a Constitution class in Corona.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you were fairly informed, and you've always been, the Q guy and all sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But my question is this. When you're going through the Constitution with me, and I got to 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, and I said that on my list of the 5 worst presidents in the history of this country is Abraham Lincoln, at that time, were you already in agreement, or did that go, huh?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't like that. Didn't shock me, because I believe that Lincoln was tyrannical before I came to the Constitution class.
And historians that are willing to admit that he was, but at the same time they want to try to slough it off as being okay. They call him the benevolent dictator.
That's what it's taught in. Obviously, that's what's taught in schools. Lincoln freed the slaves, and then you go back and read, everything he wrote 10, 12 years before, and the guy was a raging racist.
He was as duplicitous as you could possibly get.
What really clinched it for me was the fact that you look at how the Transcontinental Railroad was built, and Lincoln during the Civil War was able to decide which towns it went to. and an awful lot of money exchanged hands. And you notice the first several hundred miles of the Transcontinental Railroad was quite a bit of a zigzag between towns that were paid for the privilege of having a railroad through their station. And we know where that money went.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The funny part about
it, Jen says, by the way, she's noticed that you're real slow, Ron. And my response is, well, he's always been slow. Oh, you meant with the illness. Oh, yeah. He's slower than usual. All right. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Go ahead, Warhamster.
Oh, I was going to say
Jennifer knows me. You know, I've actually known Jennifer longer than I've known. Well, actually, I don't know. I think I've known Jennifer longer than I've known you, Doug.
So, back to the railroad.
Well, go ahead, Warhamster. Sorry, I sorry I interrupted, but I saw that. I just had to hammer Ron. Go ahead.
No, it's an abject lesson in economic theory, because the publicly funded transcontinental railroad that went across the middle part of the country to California took something like 2.5 to 3 years to build and went way over budget. And a bunch of private citizens built the transcontinental railroad from it was the Michigan or Minnesota all the way to the Seattle area. And it got done in far less time at a far less cost. So it's just an abject lesson in public versus private.
I got the dog.
Is that what that was? A dog?
My doggies are in here. Boys.
I'm so glad that I have you here to tell me what a dog sounds like.
Oh, stop.
We got to hear what a chipmunk sounded like yesterday.
That was hilarious.
It really was.
Yeah, I saw that, and I'm like, I hope Alpha doesn't do that the entire show. Yes, I watched your video.
Wow.
Well, I listened. I was driving, so I couldn't watch it.
I feel so honored.
Yeah, we are flattered.
I was stunned you were there, because you really did sound like crap. All right, let's get started. So the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, the 13th Amendment that appears in your Constitution, not the original, are the Reconstruction period amendments, and they appeared after the war between the states. But let's go back in time a little bit first. Let's talk about what happened, because it's funny, because the Constitution and history doesn't talk a lot about what happened between the War of 1812 and the war between the states. That in-between period kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And it was a period of what a friend of mine calls moralists and modernizers. It was this time in which America was trying to kind of gain its identity. There were battling factions, but the Jeffersonian Republicans had gained control for a little while. Then that party turned into the Democratic Party, then the Whigs kind of appeared, and then what today we have, Democrats and Republicans, kind of formulated in the 1850s. And the war of factions, which I get into in my video tonight, that I'm going to work on, finish hopefully tonight, regarding this FBI raid, because it ties into the political factions and what we have in place. And so this identity and this power struggle and all of this is going on. And at the same time, John Marshall is Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And he's Chief Justice from 1801 to 1836. And he has some ideas about what America should be. Andrew Jackson kind of agrees. Hamiltonian Alexander Hamilton is gone by then, passed away, but would have been in favor of what John Marshall was teaching. John Marshall was a student of Hamilton. And so then we have this young man named Abraham Lincoln who goes to law school during the tail end of John Marshall's time as Chief Justice. And the judicial world had changed from being the weakest branch with judges who have sacred honor to this. That was distracting as hell, but that's okay.
I don't know where'd it come from.
Yeah, the sound.
No, it wasn't on my end.
Wasn't on my end.
Ron didn't seem to notice it, so I don't think it was on his end. Maybe
I was muted, so
no, you weren't.
Could have been must have been the NSA.
Hmm?
Might have been the NSA.
I just said whatever.
But anyway, yeah, NSA. We're not talking about the Second Amendment today. You can go home. So here we've got this change, and Abraham Lincoln's going to law school, and the law schools are kind of teaching the John Marshall way of judicial thinking. That's judicial review, firm union, federal supremacy, regardless of authorities. And so what we've got is a young Lincoln believing that, yeah, and not that I'm trying to let him off the hook, but this is how he was trained in law school, that the federal government was in control. It was a national government. There's a firm union. That the union was sort of like the Hotel California. You could check out, but you could never leave. We've got a battle going on between the slave states and the non-slave states. And then on top of that, James Monroe screws it all up with the Missouri Compromise. Think about this for a second. The Missouri Compromise required any state that come into the Union had to have a second state come into the Union that was the opposite. So if a slave state wanted to join the Union, there had to be a free state to also come in the Union at the same time, and vice versa. And that all the slave states will be south of the southern border of Missouri. 1832. Well, the states coming into the Union, most of the time, would have voted to be free states. What the Missouri Compromise did is it elongated the time period in which slavery would still exist in the United States. The slave states would have been outnumbered, and either the war between states would have happened earlier, or they would have finally just cried uncle and gave up and slowly started abolishing, had the Missouri Compromise not gone into play. So first of all, I believe that the Missouri Compromise by James Monroe elongated the period in which slavery was legal in this country at least 30 years.
What year was the the Missouri Compromise signed? Or
1832 is when it went into effect.
Okay. So my favorite part of the story is a little fun fact that I don't know. I just learned in the last year or two is the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. There were 5 states. There were 5 states that they wanted to join the United States, and they wanted to come in as free states. But because they were south of the Mason-Dixon line, they could not come in. And that was because of the Missouri Compromise.
That's one of those other things that happened between the War of 1812 and the war between the states. And I'm glad you brought it up. And I remember when I first brought this up that Ron was like, I never heard that before. Most people haven't. We've been taught in school that Mexican-American War was a war of expansionism for the United States. It was our imperialistic push. And that's not what it was at all. Oh, stop it. You're going to make everybody start.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Tracy already said it too.
I know. All right.
So hang on a second. All right.
Shut up.
Just stop your video, Ron.
Maybe I will.
No, I'm being serious.
So, geez. See what happens when I have to work with comedians like this. But anyway, so it's like the actor. I can't work like this. No, I'm kidding. I'm okay with it. 'Cause I love Ron like a brother, a half step brother that I don't hang around with, but a brother.
I am about as sharp as a marble right now. So
sharp as a marble. Yeah, that makes about as much sense as a broken change machine. Okay, so anyway. So we've got this time period in which the Mexican-American War emerges, and a lot of people don't realize one of the early causes of that, what led to that, was a fight over Mexico's own constitution. In 1824, Mexico put in play their own constitution that was modeled after ours. And They even turned the country into states like ours, to be more like the United States. Then this guy named Santa Anna came along, tyrant. And his attitude pretty much was to rip up that Constitution and to go after anybody who supported it. And when the Yucatan Peninsula had already kind of been independent anyway, they'd kind of been in their own country and then rejoined the Federation and whatever. And it was kind of a weird situation. So rather than hammer on Yucatan Peninsula, because he had his other issues, he actually sicked the Mayans on Yucatan Peninsula at first, Mayan Indians. So you look at the history of it, it's kind of interesting. And Yucatan actually, as Warhamster pointed out earlier, like, well, that's it, man. We're getting out of here, man. And, we ought to be a part of the United States. This is what we were trying to fashion ourselves after with the 1824 Constitution as it was. So they literally sent a delegation to Washington, D.C. to apply for statehood. Now, if you get into the history books, they'll give you just about every reason but the Missouri Compromise, because they want you to believe there was other things going on. And then there were, but the primary reason is because they were south of the Missouri Compromise line, and they would not come in as a slave state. So it is a fascinating story. The Rio Grande states were also considering statehood, but after what happened to Yucatan, they decided not to send their delegation.
Another fun fact is General Santa Anna was sponsored by the European banks. And we know which ones I'm talking about. Don't you, Ron? Yeah, the same people that wanted to... European banking interests had every vested interest in breaking up the United States and every vested interest in turning Mexico into not a constitutional republic, but what it's become, a splintered, whatever you want to call it, hot messes.
Which Rio Grande state? So you're talking
the ones
about
closest, the ones closer to Texas,
like Chihuahua and
the eastern Rio Grande states.
Interesting. I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's
Isn't there just two of them, Doug? Or are you talking about the few more that are not quite on?
Well, back then there were more than two. There were some smaller ones also broken in there, but today it's like 2 states. But back then it was broken up into a number of different areas. All right. That all said, so meanwhile, factions are battling in Washington D.C. and Andrew Jackson has grabbed hold of the Jeffersonian Republican Party, and he has said, the only way to protect the Constitution is through democracy. We need to be more democratic. And he urged in the 1828 election, and this is already starting to happen in a handful of states as it was, that the people should vote for president, not the electors, because he was the people's president. He was a populist, and this regime that used the Electoral College and electors to keep themselves in power had to be broken up by the people. And so we need a popular vote at the state level to bring in the people's president, and a lot of states did it. And he didn't win the first time in 1824, but he got it in 1828. And he started pushing democracy. During that time, in 1832, about halfway through Andrew Jackson's 8-year presidency, a guy named Alexis de Tocqueville visited the United States. He had heard that we had an excellent penal system, Penal, prison system. But he'd also heard that America was a failure. In fact, Sigmund Freud at one point in history was asked, well, what do you think of America? And he says, well, it's big. And what I mean by that is there's one big mistake, Sigmund Freud. And so many of the French, they had decided, well, America was a mistake. It was going to fall apart. And now that they were moving towards democracy, well, that's for sure going to fail. So Alexis de Tocqueville came here, and he started observing. He paid attention to what was going on, and he talked to a lot of people, and he wrote a book called Democracy in America. When I first came across that book, I couldn't stand the title, because I'm like, well, no, that's not supposed to be Democracy in America. He named it that on purpose. what he was saying is democracy was on the rise in America. And democracy in America should destroy her eventually. But it was working for now because America was good. And as long as America was good, as long as America was a virtuous society, as long as America's strength was in her churches, then the democracy would survive. But the moment we lost our virtue, the moment we started to move against our moral foundation, democracy would destroy this country. Which is what we're seeing now, isn't it? Alexis de Tocqueville was right. Now, I tell you all of that so that you understand all of the dynamics that are going on. Meanwhile, as all of this is going on, and the Whigs are battling within themselves, the Whig Party had formed after the Democrat Party kind of emerged, because what happened was, as Andrew Jackson pushed democracy, the people who went to the Whig Party say, no, we're supposed to be a republic, and no, the president's not supposed to be a ruler, like Andrew Jackson's acting like. The Congress is supposed to be the strongest branch. So that's what the Whig Party was all like. But then the Whig Party began to fight within them, internally among themselves, because slavery. You had pro-slavery and anti-slavery Whigs. And as that battle ensued, eventually the Whig Party destroyed itself from within. And the anti-slavery Whigs went on to form something called the Republican Party in 1854. We know it today as a Republican Party, GOP, Grand Old Party, the nickname that it was given. And those pro-slavery Whigs wind up either with independent or smaller parties, or went back to the Democratic Party. So this is all going on. And the battle over slavery is massive. And then, as time passes, we have the courts getting involved. And we have the federal government trying to pass laws to try to keep the peace, because the battle between slavery and anti-slavery and all this stuff's going on. And We the People says, did Andrew Jackson want to create a partnership with the Crown? The South, or was it the other way around? The Crown wanted a relationship with them. Andrew Jackson didn't believe in secession. He believed it was a firm union. That didn't come till later. Go ahead, Warhamster.
Yeah, well, the Crown, when you say the Crown, you also got to talk about the British banks. And when Andrew Jackson opposed our central bank, that made him persona non grata to the European banks, especially the British ones. So there's a lot of things at play there. But no, the banking relationship was the major issue. So there was this real big divide.
Yeah, and Andrew Jackson was against central banking as well. That's one of the few good things about him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he ran on.
You know? Well, he got rid of the central bank, Second Bank of the United States, and like I said, he believed in a firm union. He felt that secession was dangerous. So so all of that happened later. But then we saw the Dred Scott case. And in the Dred Scott case, what had happened was Dred Scott was a slave who worked for a physician who was doing some traveling in the northern states, the free states, and Dred Scott sued him and said, well, now that I'm in the free states, I'm free. And he sued for his freedom. And the courts not only ruled against Dred Scott, said, no, you're still a slave. But then they also said something that really sent a shockwave throughout the country. Something that Ketanji Brown Jackson didn't know, by the way. And that was that the courts also said, in addition to, you're still a slave, any black man who was ever a slave will never be allowed to be a citizen. That sent a major shockwave. Now the call for the abolition of slavery and the battle between the pro-slave and anti-slave states grew louder. The rage, they had their days of rage and nights of rage. I'm sure they weren't just standing there screaming at the sky like the left does, but there was a lot of rage over this. And it began that process. Another thing was going on also that began a process that was putting slavery at risk. But I believe that this process would have helped us avoid the war between the states had we been smart enough to allow it to take its natural course. Founding fathers believe that once they put the outlawing of the Atlantic slave trade into place, that would spell the doom of slavery. And they were right. Missouri Compromise, so kind of altered that course. But also something else began to spell the doom of slavery. The cotton gin. People say, no, Doug, that's not right. Cotton gin meant they needed more slaves. Yeah, but what was the cotton gin? It was the beginning of a revolution of new mechanical machines that could do the work of many men. And what it began to do is move slavery from the fields to the factories. Yes, go ahead.
Can I give a modern parallel to that? Would be
sure.
Self-checkout.
Sure, yeah. Absolutely. So eventually what happened was the need for workers moved from the fields to the factories. And see, in the fields, because of the type of work and all of this, owning a person wasn't as that kind of went with it. But when it moved from the fields to the factories, it was cheaper. It was more economically reasonable not to own someone, but to hire someone to work in your factory. And so slavery was on its way out. Slavery had become economically unviable. And for the most part, slavery in the South was dying. In some cases, it remained for either certain particular plantations who had specialties or for status. But the age of slavery as it was before was done. Mm-hmm. And if we had not fought a war, I'm a firm believer within the next 10 years, after the war had started, slavery would have naturally gone the way of the Whigs. Unfortunately, we had a president who wanted war. We wanted a banking system that wanted war. And we had European elites who wanted war in America.
Well, what they needed was they needed the southern ports to collect their tariffs.
Well, that was a part of it because the North was hammering them with heavy tariffs, but it goes beyond that. And Warhamster said this before, and it's a very good observation. They wanted a divided America because a divided America was a weak America. And a weak America who's at war with itself isn't pushing that liberty thing so much. And it's easier for them to control their own people in their own countries because see how that liberty is falling apart? You don't want that. Really, that was a large part of it. Anything to say as we proceed, gentlemen? Nope. Wow.
Proceed away.
I'm either doing really well or they're just waiting to hammer me later. So now we've got this President Abraham Lincoln, and a lot of people don't realize this. When he was debating to become president, and remember, he lost the first time. But in 1860, that election, you've heard of the Lincoln-Douglas debates? Read those. Abraham Lincoln didn't argue for the abolition of slavery. He argued that it be managed and maintained with only the slave states and not expanded. He argued for not expanding slavery, and he argued that if slaves are released, freed, emancipated, that as the founders tried to do with Liberia, and actually was kind of successful under James, you talk about James Monroe, Monrovia, named after James Monroe, is the capital of Liberia. Liberia was set up basically as a country in Africa for former American slaves. To send them back to Africa.
That has been a resounding success, by the way.
That's sarcasm.
It was a
Everybody can't
resounding.
tell that.
It actually was a resounding success until they decided to follow socialist, chase after socialist governance.
Yes.
Go ahead, Warhamster.
Oh, I was just going to make sure everyone realized that the sarcasm was dripping off of Ron's statement.
That's the reason why I said it the way I said it. Well, it actually was at first. But yeah, no, it isn't now. No. So anyway, and Lincoln's saying, well, yeah, someone's emancipated because he was such a racist. Get him out of my country. Send him back to Africa. That was Abraham Lincoln's response. The great emancipator that freed the slaves who didn't free the slaves. And so he eventually won. But here's the thing. In 1860, the South is very interested in this particular election because while Abraham Lincoln wasn't necessarily arguing for the abolition of slavery, the Republican Party was. And if Abraham Lincoln won, the South knew that the beginning of the end was upon them. And so between the time of the election of Abraham Lincoln and the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln, all of the states that were going to seceded. The America that Abraham Lincoln was inaugurated into was a different America than the one that he won the election for. And then what ensued after that was the war between the states, to the joys of those who wanted war.
So I was listening to a Brian McClanahan video last week talking about this exact subject. It was responding to an article where everyone talking about how the South refused to compromise, and that's simply not true. They were offering compromises.
Refusing compromise.
Well, it was actually we actually have documents of Abraham Lincoln writing to the fellow Republican politicians, telling them not to compromise. Yeah, he said this is in writing, in his own words. Abraham Lincoln was saying, do not compromise. He wanted the war.
He wanted the war. Europe wanted the war. Everybody wanted the war, except for the South. But the South was willing to fight the war because they were fighting for what they believed was their constitutional way of life, in the sense of making their own decisions, states' rights. It's funny because the Democrats were against states' rights under Andrew Jackson. Then they decided states' rights were important as the seceding states.
Well, when you're getting oppressed, you have a tendency to like that. When the federal government is throwing tariffs at you, you start to change your opinion.
And then the Democrats became the party of no states' rights again later.
That's because they're the party of convenience. Whatever fits their political will.
Well, exactly. Well, I've been saying for years, what's the answer to the question? Whatever benefits the Democrats the most at the moment, even if it disagrees with what they said 10 minutes ago.
That's exactly true.
All right, so now I can't believe the crap they shoved down our throats in school. Tracy, you and I both. Now, that all said, let's move on. So the war is fought. The war is ended. The North wins. Abraham Lincoln did not free the slaves. The 13th Amendment did. So, Doug, the Emancipation Proclamation. Emancipation Proclamation, first of all, is an executive order. It's not a law. It's a proclamation. So it has no force of law. Number two, what it did is it declared that any slaves that were in territories that had been occupied by the North, that was in the South, those slaves would be freed. It did not free slaves in the slave states remaining in the North or in the South. It said, if you're in occupied territory, you're free. The reason why he did that was to make the war about slavery, because originally it wasn't. I made a statement a moment ago that may have confused you. I talked about the slave states in the North. There were slave states in the North. When the war between the states started, one of the ways we know it wasn't all about slavery is the fact that A, Kentucky, Delaware, Maryland were all slave states, but they were a part of the Northern Union. Secondly, after Virginia had seceded, 13 counties seceded from Virginia, and then reapplied as a state to the Union as a new state, West Virginia, as a slave state. And they were admitted to the Union as a slave state. If the war was about slavery, then why would a slave state be admitted into the Union? The war was not about slavery at first. Sure, slavery was a component. Slavery was an ingredient that mixed into the broader scheme of things. But in truth, the war was about, is this a firm union? Is it a volunteer union? Is the federal government acting unconstitutionally? And if they are not acting unconstitutionally, should states be allowed to remove themselves from the contract because there's been a breach in contract? And if you read the very beginning of the Confederate Constitution of the United States, that's exactly what it says. The Union has breached the contract. We're out of here. That's essentially what it says, paraphrasing, of course. So that's what it was about. But Emancipation Proclamation makes it all about slavery. Well, why would Lincoln do such a thing? Remember what we were talking about earlier about Europe having so much interest in what was going on? They were helping the Confederate States. And then the Emancipation Proclamation was written. It's a brilliant, brilliant political move. I may have my problems with Abraham Lincoln, but I will not take away from the fact that he was brilliant. It was a brilliant move. Made the war all about slavery. The people back home in Europe says, whoa, wait a second. We abolished slavery. Now our government's here helping pro-slave states in a war about slavery? No. We don't approve. And so Europe began to withdraw its assistance. And that included the European naval units that had been blockading the Union Navy out of southern ports. Europe got out of the way, southern ports got hit, and the biggest one being New Orleans, which split the Southern Confederacy into half, plus gave the North a much-needed supply route up the Mississippi River. And from that point, anybody who plays war or understands war or studies war knows this. Typically the moment in a war, one party suddenly has to start fighting multiple fronts, they're done. And that's what happened. The South now had to fight multiple fronts. And they couldn't, and they had more personnel actually. There were more personnel in the South. They had more people in the fight. But when you start having to fight multiple fronts, you're done. And that's what happened. So now the war's over. The states have still not come back into the United States. And we have a Republican Congress dominated by the Union states making laws regarding how the southern states are going to be returned to the Union and how they're going to be treated once they get back into the Union. And out of it, 3 amendments also emerged. For the most part, ratified by the northern states. And when southern states had been admitted and were a part of the ratification process, it really didn't matter because they were under military jurisdiction anyway. And they ratified under duress. 14th Amendment, it actually took a while to get that one ratified because it was such a hot mess in the eyes of certain individuals that it really took a lot of time to get it sold.
Still is a hot mess.
Still is a hot mess, especially the way it's being interpreted. I actually think that it's written okay, but I think the interpretation is what's the hot mess. All right, now. Let's read. First Amendment 3. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories about the language there. All it's saying is, if you're in prison, you're not going to make a wage. If you've been convicted of a crime, involuntary servitude's okay, because you're a criminal. and you're in prison. Otherwise, slavery's gone. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. I hate the fact they started using that at the end of these amendments. First of all, Congress is not there to enforce anything. They're there to legislate. And the executive branch really isn't supposed to enforce. They're supposed to execute the laws. Some people might call it enforcement. But this idea that government is there to enforce, the federal government through the law can enforce, kind of a tyrannical stance, isn't it? And then if you're going to enforce, what does that mean? Well, that means you're going to need agencies to be the enforcement. So you're going to create things like, I don't know, the FBI. Funny I should bring that up. Warhamster, question for you.
Yes, sir.
Is there any place in the Constitution that gives the federal government the authority to have a law enforcement agency?
Let me browse real quick. Nope, didn't see it.
No, there's nothing in there. Well, here's something that's interesting, though. It does tell you how they're supposed to execute the laws of the Union. Now, understand something. I know it's a little bit of a side trip, but it's important because it ties into what we're talking about. The federal government was giving so few authorities that it had almost nothing to do domestically. Nothing. Don't need much budget. If all of their authorities, for the most part, was war, negotiation, treaties, trade, maritime, the border, disputes between the states, and a handful of issues that were designed to preserve the Union, such as mail, M-A-I-L, mail, copyright, patent office, so on and so forth. Other than that, their domestic authorities were zippo. Therefore, when told in Article 1, Section 4, that Congress ought to meet at least once per year, there were those that said, whoa, that's too often. What are we going to do? There's no authority. I mean, unless they're at war, what are we going to do? I'd rather be working my farm or tending my store or running my practice.
Good.
Right?
Good.
But there's going to be some laws that are going to be domestic. So how does the executive branch execute those laws? Because obviously the president's not going to do it personally. He's going to have an arm to do it. And that's when someone says, well, gosh, Doug, that's where this agency and that agency and that. No. See what the Constitution says. Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8. Let's get there. There we go. If you get using this pocket Constitution, that's on page 7. And it says that the Congress shall have the power to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union. So there is something in the Constitution that tells the federal government how to execute the laws of the Union domestically through the militia. There's no authority for all these agencies, all these departments. But there is an authority for the militia to be used to execute the laws of the Union. Now, who's the militia? You are. And we the people, you're getting ahead of me here. But we're going to answer what you just said. Who's the commander-in-chief of the militia at the county level?
Sheriff.
The county sheriff. So if the county sheriff says, hey, militia, this garbage is unconstitutional. We're not executing it. We're not going to enforce it. We're not going to do this. Federal government, pound sand. Unconstitutional. There's the check against federal intrusion into the domestic areas of the United States. They're not supposed to have a police agency. They're not supposed to have an FBI. They're not supposed to have an FDA or an ATF. or a HUD, if there are laws that are domestic, which are very few because there's very few authorities, their agency for applying those laws, or I should say executing those laws, is the militia. And if the militia tells them to pound sand, and the sheriff says pound sand, it's not going to get enforced. So how is it now the FBI can exist? How is it that there is any authority for the FBI to exist? And where in the Constitution does it give the federal government the authority to have a police agency and an investigative agency? It doesn't. So this raid on Mr. Trump yesterday at Mar-a-Lago, while he was at Trump Tower in New York, was unconstitutional. But Doug, there was a warrant. I don't care. They don't have authority for that warrant. They're not even supposed to have a policing agency. If there's investigations that need to be made, then local investigative institutions can carry it out. And if they believe it's junk, they can tell the Congress and the executive branch, kiss off. Boy,
Doug,
didn't expect that, did you?
There's a interesting part about that warrant is it was signed by a local Florida judge who Trump had actually appointed, but he's got a fun background.
Yeah, he used to work for somebody in particular. Go ahead.
Well, he was a U.S. attorney who was prosecuting Epstein and up and quit one day and started working for Epstein, which is really probably a bit of a conflict of interest. I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah, I heard about that this morning. Yeah. One of the things I love about doing my Constitution classes, sometimes they get information I haven't gotten yet. I started hearing that in the class this morning.
There's a question up above that you're going to want to address, or I'll do it. It's from S. Flackey. He says, was that constitutional for Virginia to split? And the quick answer is yes, because Virginia was no longer part of the Union. It wasn't under the Constitution, and the other counties in West Virginia were applying for statehood. And it's important today because you've got all these movements in California, like to secede from California, which would not be constitutional because it's not the same thing.
Now, basically what he's saying is in Article 4, it says that if a state is going to be formed from a part of another state, the state that's associated with that has to give their permission. Their state legislature has to. But Virginia was no longer under the Constitution. They had seceded. So they didn't have to give their permission. Those counties seceded, applied for statehood. Virginia at that point was a part of a different country. They were not a part of the United States anymore. Good question. It's a common question, but it's a good question. Most people just don't know that.
Sorry to sidetrack. I just didn't want to get that thing buried up. Going off page. It is a good question.
Yeah, it's a very good question. All right. And I haven't really been paying attention because I was so busy talking. So thanks for paying attention to the chat. Now I know Devil Dog's in there, so I should pay attention just because Devil Dog's there. Good to see a Devil Dog.
Did he sneak in late? I think he did.
FBI has no congressional charter, so they can't do business on American soil. Well, there's no authority for them to exist in the first place, though, charter or not. But you're right. But the charter typically isn't issued by Congress as much. It's usually supposed to be a commission, which is issued by the president. But anyway, that's a different conversation. Well, I digress.
Yeah, the short way of saying that whole thing about their right to exist is Congress can't create an agency that does not explicitly. They can't just do it by legislation. They would have to do it with a constitutional amendment.
Right.
If you want to, yeah. You just can't legislate something into being.
And the executive branch can't create something unless it's necessary in order for them to execute the laws. And it's not necessary. They're not necessary to execute the laws.
The problem then comes down
to that's the recent is it Brune or the recent court case in West Virginia against the EPA?
Well, what that did is, and the SEC case kind of did the same thing, but this one was more explicit, was it was basically saying that the agencies can't make rules unless those rules are directly tied to a law that's already been made. To make a rule that's not attached to a law means they're making law. They're legislating themselves. They're legislating through the agency. And all legislative powers here granted shall be vested in a Congress, Article 1, Section 1. And they can't make rules that are not directly related to executing laws that are on the books.
Yeah, and that directly applies to Obamacare, because Obama, with his executive orders, changed Obamacare 50-some times. And with this current Supreme Court, the Obamacare would be tossed out in a heartbeat based on those recent rulings, and someone should challenge it. And the argument's going to be, well, without these rules he made, Obamacare wouldn't work. We couldn't. That's right. It doesn't work. That's the whole point.
I think it's Bruen, the Bruen case. Well, what they've done is they basically said, look, you can't make you just can't let these guys let some agency come in and make law.
The Bruen case, actually, that's the gun case. New York.
Okay. That's right. Okay. So, but I'm thinking of the
EPA case is the one that says, yeah, you can't just arbitrarily make rules.
Well, and that is being felt across the board.
What's been happening though is the lower courts are not following the Supreme Court's lead, especially when it comes to Dobbs.
Well, but specifically in cases about with the EPA case, that's having ramifications across with the SEC, the ATF, all sorts of places that all these agencies are losing their power. They're still trying to make arguments of their validity, and the courts are like, nah, sorry, wrong. And that's we're starting to see. I don't. You guys don't pay attention to the gun stuff as much as I do, but there's just an absolute tidal wave of challenges that are coming in as a result of that case that are going, that are going to go against the ATF, and so much to the point where I'm even hearing that they might be going. There might be challenges raised against the 1934 NFA, and the NFA is what governs fully automatic weapons, suppressors, and short barrel rifles.
And S. Flacky, I wanted to address something S. Flacky put in there. So every rule Congress makes regarding the internal affairs of the U.S. are unconstitutional. Not necessarily. It depends on if there's an authority for it. For example, internal affairs in the sense of the Postal Service or things like copyright laws, patents, things like that, they can make law regarding that. But anything that's not within their authority, which is most domestic things, no, they can't. Or at least they're not supposed to. Well, I hate saying can't, because they can and they will, but you know what I mean. Legally, they can't. And then I wanted to refer to Tracy, who wrote, "I love this class." Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate that. And Kikio says the same thing, but I appreciate that. But anyway, get to the point here. So we've got a situation that's spiraling out of control. And here's the thing, and we're going to take a second week, obviously, on these war between the states Reconstruction amendments, because we're barely tipping into this stuff because it's opened up all kinds of other discussions, and that's a good thing. Here's the thing. People ask me, well, Doug, when did all of this start? My first response is before the ink was dry. But when you want to get to the real big shift, war between the states, we went from the United States are to the United States is. They pushed us from a federal government with limited authorities to a national government controlling everything. That's essentially what happened. That's the shift we saw with the war between the states. Abraham Lincoln, the reason why I rank him as one of the 5 worst presidents of the United States is because he was the guy that began the process that really put us on the downslope. That pushed us towards the progressive era. That pushed us towards the the Federal Reserve and the 16th Amendment, the 17th Amendment. That pushed us towards the New Deal. All that began with Lincoln's federal supremacy, firm union attitude. The IRS, by the way, for those of you who don't know this, 1862, Lincoln administration. So, and this is all important. And as a student of history, you need to know this. As an activist who wants to make change, you need to know this.
Lincoln, Lincolnian America is Hamiltonian America on steroids.
It's a good comparison. There's a couple of things that Lincoln did that are good. So when I occasionally say he's a mixed bag, and I'll talk about the greenbacks, which is a far better system. That Hamilton wanted a central bank. The greenbacks were us printing our own money debt free, and it was very successful. It's something to be studied when we talk about what the proper.
Well, it goes back to Article 1, Section 8, where Congress coins money, and that's essentially what they were doing. I mean, granted, I'd prefer to be coin and not paper, but nonetheless, that's essentially what they were doing. Congress was making the money and regulating the value thereof, and that's constitutional. That separates us. That keeps us away from the central banks in Europe, and I agree. That was one of the few good things.
Well, do you know the reason they did the greenbacks is to finance the Civil War? We needed money, so Lincoln went to the European banks, and they said, "Sure, we'll lend you money at 37% interest." So he goes, "The heck with that," and that's where the greenback was born.
All right, now we're about 2 minutes from the top of the hour. So, We the People says Doug Jim Jordan said he's going to kick that FBI out of the states, and they will. Over jurisdiction in D.C. Let's see if he walks the walk. Yeah, let's see if he walks the walk. Yes, sir.
Did you see the clip the other day of Ted Cruz questioning Christopher Wray when he was asking him about the Gonzales flag and the Gadsden flag?
Yeah, that was great.
Ross flag.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, not that I'm a huge Ted Cruz fan, but
Ted Cruz is an interesting sort because as a senator, he's not a bad senator. He's not a great one. I don't love Ted Cruz, but he's better than most of the monkeys that are in the cage.
Well, he got that one right. So yeah. I've made the argument a bunch of times that I still to this day don't know how the powers that be have convinced law enforcement that if you talk about the Constitution, you are somehow some radical crazy person who is anti-American and hates the government. It is baffling to me.
We the People, I don't need to advertise about me being on your show on Friday night because you're doing a great job in the chat on your own. But if you're not watching the chat, I'm going to be on We the People's The World is Waking Up channel again on Friday. Last time I was on there, it was supposed to be a debate, but the debaters didn't show up, so it became kind of the Doug show, but it worked out pretty good. I'll be throw the link in there, We the People. Throw the link in there. Michelle, thank you. She says, I have learned so much from this class. Kikio says, me too. I appreciate that. And as much as I enjoy doing these classes, and I have successfully taught classes on my own live for quite a while, I have to admit, it's sure a lot more fun and a lot easier to do when I've got guys like Warhamster and Ron Partain in my corner discussing it with me, and they are well informed enough that they can complement what I've got to say, and I do appreciate that.
Thank you, Doug.
Hey, real quick, We the People, thank you, Doug. We the People just asked who the best Congress people are. And speak on that topic, has anybody heard how Ron Johnson did in his primary today? Because that's an important one to have come back. He is mostly very solid on some of the most important topics. Ron Johnson has absolutely stepped up. He's been all over the Hunter Biden situation. But he's got a tough primary. I haven't heard the results yet.
Clay Higgins from Louisiana is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I've become a real Clay Higgins fan.
Very much agreed. What was that speech you gave about a month ago? You and I both. I think you said it.
Yeah, he was. It was talking about the this red flag law, and this police commissioner or police whatever was given testimony, and say if the law is in place, I would confiscate guns from Americans, and he gives a 5-minute just hammer on a little bit of history and why that's not right and it's unconstitutional, and he talks about takes all of their excuses. Well, we've got mental health, we got the veterans who have particular skills that's dangerous in society, and guns are everywhere and school shootings and blah 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 blah, and he goes back in history and he just dismantles all of their arguments with it. I did put the video on Political Pistachio, so if you want to go back to politicalpistachio.com and find Clay Higgins' red flag law speech, I do have video on that on my site. But yeah, Clay Higgins, and the thing is, before I saw that video, I didn't know of him. And he and after I saw that, I did some research on him, and he quickly thrust to like the top 5 in my book. I mean, he's just, absolutely incredible in our target. And I actually sent out a request for him to be on my radio show. I've not gotten a response again. I'm gonna send out another request again. Sometimes it just takes knocking on the door more than once. But
yeah, the other good thing is given what's happened in the primaries these last couple months, it looks like we're going to probably at least double the amount of good Congress people in D.C. We got a lot of really strong people that have won the primaries and have a good chance to win.
Yeah, the rhinos are being kicked out.
Yeah, not fast enough, but it's happening.
Lisa Boebert, I thought it was Laura Boebert.
Again, I reiterate that if I still don't think that, I think voting is important, but I still don't think that the outcomes of the elections, there's still too much control of the establishment, and because of the massive amount of control that the establishment wields, I still don't think that the elections, while they are going to help affect change, I still don't think it's going to be enough yet.
Right. Well, no, of course not. There's only one quick fix, and that's a convention of states. But it took them 160 something years to get us to this point. It's going to take a long time to roll it back. Right now, we're just playing for survival. Let's see if we can maintain the slight bit of a constitutional republic we have left and start to push back slowly. And that requires surviving November. We have to we got to get the Democrats out of power. So, if we can hold the line,
we have to get the establishment out of power.
Yeah, and
the Democrats, the Republicans. There are Republicans that are worse than Democrats.
Yes, you are. Yeah, this is almost Captain Obvious level stuff, Ron. We totally agree, but it's not going to happen overnight. They are very well entrenched, and there's a system that's going to take a long time to unwind.
And that's my point.
Yep, but it requires winning elections to get there. But if you want to do a quick fix, let's get our convention of states.
Oh, there's a lot of people that will not be happy with that statement, but I'm not one of them. I agree. All right, real quick, Conservative Cowboy, thank you for your news break in the chat room, even though I'm getting ready to leave and should be already gone. Let me read this real quick. Joe Biden's FBI apprehends GOP representative while traveling with family and seizes his phone after raiding President Trump's home last night. After raiding President Trump's home, FBI detained Representative Scott Perry and seized his phone. Scott Perry is a staunch Trump supporter. It is now open season on conservatives and patriotic Americans. The government has declared war on the American people. Then it goes on to say, Republican Representative Scott Perry of Pennsylvania says that the FBI has confiscated his cell phone. In an exclusive statement, he told Fox News that while traveling with family earlier in the day, he was approached by 3 FBI agents who handed him a warrant and requested that he turn over his cell phone. Confiscation of the congressman's personal cell phone comes one day after Mar-a-Lago. It's getting repetitive there, but that's good information. It's good to know. So thank you for the breaking news there, Conservative Cowboy. And pay attention. There's a lot of primaries. There's a few primaries going on today. Pay attention. This is all important. All right. Anything else, gentlemen?
No, sir.
Been a pleasure being here. As always, I appreciate you in the audience. Never forget, united we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. We'll see you next week.
Did you see my shirt, Doug?
Make your picture bigger so I can read it. No, make your picture big. You know, like I'm
you
the
can't
big
see
one
that?
right now.
Oh.
No, I don't have it on full screen.
It's just a flag, and it's got like the ends of the flag.
I thought there was like words or something. I was wondering if it said something like,
they're ships. They're ships. I thought you of all people would appreciate that, being the Navy guy you are.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I couldn't tell it was a ship either. I thought it was words.
Ships, different types of ships.
Yeah, but from here on the small screen, it looks like words.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's the reason I told him to make it a bigger screen.
That's because this is Grunt Style. Because I know the guys at Grunt Style.
Oh, do you?
Great.
Yeah, I know the owner.
All right, guys. It's been real.
As always, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you guys next week. Gotta go.
See you guys. Alrighty.
Hey, Ron.